Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along. This is the Improving Local Authority Building Control. It's the first show and tell that Unboxed are hosting. So it's the fourth one of the alpha phase, but this is focused specifically on the research and development work that we are supporting the project with. So to kick us off, we'll just go over our agenda. We're going to have a review of the workshop. We're going to look at some vision statements that came out of that. Dawn's going to take us through a bit of our research approach. Rhiann's going to cover some of the technical investigation we've kicked off, and then there will be hopefully some time for questions and suggestions at the end. Next slide, please. But before we get on to that, we very quickly just wanted to introduce ourselves for anyone who has not yet met us, and also for anyone who might be catching up on the recording later. So my name is Tom Gaylor. I'm a designer working on this project. I've got previous experience working across a range of local and central government services. Most recently, quite a lot of engagement with planning, some of which I think is relevant to the world of building control. Dawn, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, hello, I'm Dawn Turner and I am a designer and researcher, but on this project I'll be carrying out the user research. Pass over to Rhiann.
I'm Rhiann. I'm the R&D developer on the project. I'll be calling on my colleague Andrew's expertise as and when. Very, very interested in this whole area, and I've also worked on BOPs for those of you who are involved with BOPs.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas. I'm the delivery manager on the project, and I'm just here to make sure the team has what they need to deliver, and we deliver in what we said we will, on time and in budget. Hand over to Martin.
Martin Evans, I'm head of product at Unboxed. I'll just be supporting the project from a kind of strategic level and as and when needed. Thank you.
Great. So just to give you a bit of a review of our workshop that we held on the 19th of November. So this was very kindly hosted by City of London. We kicked off the day before we got into the meat of discussing the future of building control by looking a bit of the history of building control. So we very kindly were given a guided tour to the sort of origin of building control, the site of the start of the Great Fire of London, and a trip up the monument to sort of inspect it, and we're given some of the background to some of the origins of the earliest building sort of regulations that have existed in the UK, and then follow that up by taking it sort of 500 years or so forward to today and where we might be going next with that. Next slide, please. As part of the workshop, we started to discuss how we might approach the alpha phase of this project. So there's been a discovery. We now understand much more about who the users of building control services are, what are their needs, where are some of the pain points. We've identified that there's some in the alpha, we want to tackle things that are facing the sort of the customer or the resident, so those people who are making an application for building control, as well as those who are working within local authorities to process those applications and to do the inspections, the surveyors, etc. And then sort of sat around all of this is the idea that there needs to be some data standards that underpin it. And to cover these sort of three areas, the front end, the back end, and the data standards, we're going to focus on one journey, which we're going to prototype as part of this alpha phase. And for that, we've selected, through discussion with the workshop attendees, the full plans journey. So you'll be hearing a little bit more about how we're going to be approaching that in a second. But we're also aware that there is, various other services or journeys or processes that make up a building control service that's provided by a local authority, and we're going to cover these in a higher level. So rather than building a sort of step-by-step prototype, we'll maybe address these at a pattern level. So that will be looking at things like is there an apply journey? Is there a validation step? Is there a booking that needs to take place? Is there a certificate or a register that needs to be held? And trying to map out these kind of core blocks that make up these different journeys, and then identify some best practice that we could use further down the line in a potential beta phase for those. So another bit of that workshop was also discussing the vision statements. And for this, we drew on a vision statement that had been created at Discovery to help us shape two vision statements, one for the wider project and one specifically for this alpha phase. So following feedback, this is our sort of latest iteration. These will probably be revisited and changed as we go through the project, but give you a good idea of sort of what our current thinking is. So for the project vision, so this is the broader arc, including Discovery, including this alpha and hopefully future phases. To set the benchmark for building control through efficient, easy to use, smart digital tools, best practice service patterns, and setting data standards for interoperability, making local authority building control an innovative, trusted service of choice. So we think this covers sort of the broad aims of what we're trying to do, and hopefully this will help us with some of our decision making and prioritization as we go forwards. You know, if anything we're trying to do is trying to help us move in this direction. But we know that we've got this alpha phase, which is focused on a sort of smaller subset of that vision. And so if we have a look at that, our alpha vision is to explore, prototype and test solutions that demonstrate how building control can be improved to deliver a better user experience for customers and staff, improve the quality and usefulness of data, and to position local authorities as the service provider of choice. And so you can see how these two work together. We've got slightly more specific things that we'll be doing in this alpha phase, but hopefully moving us all in the direction of that project vision. If you've got any thoughts on these, any suggestions, do get in touch. We will be looking to sort of revisit these probably halfway through and towards the end of the project as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to Dawn to take us through our research approach.
Great, thanks, Tom. Okay, so since the workshop, we have been looking at the existing journey map for full plans. So this was a great start for us. It was a very thorough journey map, but we've been looking at it to identify the gaps that we've got in knowledge, and also any parts that we need a bit more clarification. We've also been looking at what data requirements are needed along that journey. So what data is being collected, where and by whom. And this is really helping us to develop our research questions that we're going to be taking into our user research in the next upcoming weeks before Christmas. We've also been creating a set of user stories, and that is helping us to understand the needs of those users as they progress through that journey. Okay, and so in terms of recruitment, just want to say firstly, thanks for everyone who's been helping us to do this. Yeah, it's going to be quite a difficult task, especially with Christmas almost on our doorstep. But we've done well so far. We have 4 surveyor research sessions lined up. We decided to start with the sort of internal stakeholders, so technical support officers and surveyors, to really, as I say, flesh out that process a bit more for us. If there is anyone who knows of a technical support officer that might be able to help us, preferably outside of London if possible, just to give us a bit more of a spread in terms of our sample, please get in touch. We have a booking link so they can actually book directly with me at the time that suits them. But please get in touch with me on Slack if you can help with that. And then after that, we're going to be moving on to more client facing, so not client facing, the client stakeholders in the process, so homeowners, builders, architects, and anyone else who is involved. I'd say that will hopefully get on with that before started with that before Christmas. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think just on that, if you have got standing forums, engagement forums, people who are already involved in stuff, then it might be helpful for us to know of that, because they could be useful for us, and particularly to sort of get the ball rolling, and then we can maybe go and recruit some of the less involved or the less often heard voices in the building control process.
Okay, I'm just going to pass over to Rianne now.
Okay, so next slide, please. Obviously, for the alpha, we are not going to be building and delivering actual finalized software, but there is a fair amount of technical work to do even at this stage. So I started off, as you can see on the diagram, the data standards piece kind of overlays both the front end and the back end and is hugely important. So we are hoping to make recommendations for data standards, not one of the deliverables for this. So in order to understand what we can recommend for the future, we need to understand what the current state of play is. So I started by evaluating statutory reporting responsibilities, which at the moment are quite spreadsheet based. And then moved on to having a look at previous pilots that have been created around structured, consistent planning data in the past. And then finally, I had a look at how different private sector associations and organisations structure their building control data. It was very interesting. There were some common themes running through all of this. So the next stage here is going to be to recruit people to talk to internal stakeholders, just as Dawn is doing. I'll put a call out on the Slack. And as we move on, we're also going to be looking at data standards around planning data, which obviously we at Unboxed are very, very familiar with how planning data is structured, to see which common elements can be used here. Next slide, please. So in parallel with looking at data standards, something else that I've been doing in the background is creating a coded prototype platform for modelling back office flows. So we're going to be using a variety of different coded and no code prototype tools during this part of the project, but some background work needed to be done in case we needed to provide the more kind of complex back-end task-based flows. So we've done that during this sprint and we'll be building on it during future sprints. And that's me.
What's next?
Dawn, you might just need to come off mute. I think we...
I'm sorry.
had a few internet connection issues, so I think it was caused a bit of problem with our sound.
Okay, so yeah, upcoming, as I mentioned, we have some research sessions booked in next couple of weeks. We're going to be starting sketching for full plans. The key themes that are going to be occurring through that. Be validating that through our research. We're going to be exploring the other journeys, so yet to be determined. Is high level prototyping.
So yeah, so if anyone has got any questions for us, do feel free to come on mute. Suggestion, the more challenging the questions are, the better. It's a great opportunity to discuss anything we've heard or seen. Are we having, sorry, Stephen, we might be having real internet issues, I think, our end. I think I'm not sure we're
No.
I'm going to connect to my hotspot.
Yeah, it's okay.
Did you have a question? I think that's-
Yeah, sorry. This is going to be a really daft question, I suppose, because I've come into this quite late. I have heard bits and pieces around it from a while ago from Nitesh. But what's the background to this? Is this a government program to try and standardize building control system data, or is this you building another system that we could purchase if we didn't want to use Uniform, for instance?
So I think the specific scope of that is sort of like specifically where we're going to end up is, I don't think, totally known. So whether it, I think there's definitely the potential that this could end up with a new alternative software provider. It could end up with new standardized data patterns. It could end up with a bunch of learnings on how to improve and control services, but that it's neither software nor necessarily data standards. I think we are hoping that we can deliver sort of outcomes in this phase, or we can get towards some of those goals. We are definitely not going to get to the end point of that, of like saying, I think we're running up until about April, here's a new piece of software, or here are finalized data standards, but we're really laying the foundations for some future work. Others may know better than me, but my understanding is this has been funded by MHCLG, who funded the discovery phase, which I think, I don't know whether you specifically were involved in.
No, that's what I knew. It was being funded by MHCLG,
and
and I couldn't get my head around why they would try and influence a commercial market other than to set a data standard. And I have had a conversation with somebody who used to work at our authority at Lichfield, who now works in another authority, and he has had some contact, I think, with us. It might be with yourselves, I'm not sure, but from a planning perspective, and he's talking slightly differently in terms about a standardized planning type data protocol, for want of a better description, so that data can be more publicly accessible. And I kind of think, is that what this is about? Rather than it being a here's another system that you could buy if you really wanted to.
Sorry, David. I'm Martin from Unboxed. I'm head of product at Unboxed. We've been working on the back office planning system as part of the Open Digital Planning project, and there's a kind of multi-stream. I think this is coming from a separate funding pot, as far as I understand it. That remit there is definitely planning, and as part of that, there's been a kind of many faceted approach to try and improve the planning system. One of which is to build alternative products. So within planning, there's an application, public-facing application system called Planex. There's a back office planning system which we're building, and then there's a register for that information to end up being published on and to open to consultation. But they're also doing a lot of work around the data standards, and we're working with existing suppliers to try and get them to open up their system, standardize the data, make the data available via open APIs. And then, so that's the second strand. And I guess the third strand with Open Digital Planning is the community building. So bringing a lot of councils together to actually try and solve some of the problems and build digital capability and confidence. So the outcome is not definitely a bit of software at this stage for building control. There certainly is a challenge, interoperability with existing systems, and whether you could build a separate building control that can interoperate with any of the different planning systems or registers. But there's I think it could be an option at the end, and I think we've been asked to present some options at the end of, would you build an alternative back office system? Would you build an alternative application, public facing application system? Or is the that, or is it sufficient to come up with some data standards, and then, as they have done in planning, create legislation around those data standards to say they have to be observed by all different planning building control systems? So the options are open. That's what we're trying to kind of nail down a little bit, I think.
Thank you.
David,
do you think there's a cause? Sorry. Do you think there's a cause for a need for an alternative system?
Yes, I do know of one that I have seen that started off as a submission portal. So front end would look like is submit a plan, but the back end data space is where I want to be, because iDocs, I don't think I'm alone in this thought, aren't very proactive certainly when it comes to building control, and it's a very clunky system because it's different things bolted together. And building controls always lacked integration. So we've got a front end, we've got our own online form system, but that doesn't talk to Uniform. We can make it talk to Uniform. We could go down the planning portal route, but I don't want planning portal charging my customers 80, 90 quid an application when they can go to our competitors and not get that charge. They don't seem to appreciate that. And to be fair, neither did iDocs, because iDocs implemented their own system and they wanted to charge their customers, and we all went, no, you're not. So it didn't. There were some installations, but not many, and it was a system that could have pulled all of the functionality together in Uniform and made it work better. I wouldn't have said it was brilliant, but better. But our problem certainly with iDocs, another problem, there's loads of problems, is they seem to focus on the planning system, and then we get the dregs of what's left over in terms of funding, or that's the perception. So they introduce things, but they're not particularly efficient or effective. Yeah. And we still wonder sometimes, why have they introduced something? Because it makes no sense. There must be a user group somewhere hidden away that they go to, that nobody knows about. We all blame the London authorities because we perceive that they're bigger and got more money to spend. Pardon?
They meet every couple of years, that group, I think.
Oh, yeah. But transparency would be useful, because if we can go off down a different route with a different system, but then still connect into our corporate systems, then that helps everybody. My problem is I've got 6 councils, and one system, so we can only ever connect into one, which is the Lichfield system. We can only connect back into Lichfield, so connecting out into all the other 5 is tricky.
Yeah. I think we need to have a longer conversation about this, David.
Yeah.
Maybe at our next workshop. Rianne, did you want to ask something? Sorry, before Stephen comes in.
Yeah, I'll let Stephen go, but I just wanted to say quickly, David, it sounds like I would certainly benefit, and I'm sure the rest of the team, from a long conversation with you and potentially the colleague you mentioned. So we'll reach out separately after this to have a chat.
Yeah, Brill, thank you.
Stephen?
Thank you. So I just wanted to come in on the questions bit. I did experience quite a spotty connection, so I couldn't hear half of the presentation, but I could read the slide, so that helped. The question on where this is going, and what its overall objectives are, I think it's a good question that David asks, and it asks because it helps us reconsider what it is we're doing. You know, we're part way through the process, and well, let's go back to fundamentals. What is it that we really are doing here? And the fundamentals are that all councils are delivering a public service. So what the outcome here must be for the benefit of the public. It must enable the building control applications to be made more simply, more straightforwardly, more consistently, because it's not just the householders and the builders, it's also the architects and the surveyors who put in applications across multiple authorities. So consistency is key, and that's consistency of front end, consistency of data. And that ties in with what David was saying about a portal, but it could be a portal per council, but exactly the same portal updated at the same time. And then you've got systems within that make it easier internally to process, like initial notice processing, and perhaps a module in there that looks at changes to legislation. So when a new field is added in Form 7, the system automatically scans for it. And then the other point is future scanning. We know we're going into an AI world. We know that's happening. It's happening now, and we're at the early stages. So whatever we do has to be open sourced and enabled for any council that wants to analyze its data, or for any of the environmental information that's free and available to the public, or freedom of information stuff that's available to the public. That also needs to be accessible and interchangeable. Interoperability, I think, was the term that Rian used the last time, and I think it's a very good word to use, because the whole purpose of this is to make it better, not just to replace an existing clunky system or several existing clunky systems, but to make the process end to end for the client, the designers, and for the public services. And I think that should be added to our end result goals. Did you want to have a question on that, Martin, or were you just coming in on something
Thank
else?
you very much, Stephen. Yeah.
I was just going to respond to the point that you make about interoperability, and to David's point about, are we going to build a new system? I was explaining about in planning, they've decided to create some new products almost to show what interoperability looks like, because it's not really in the interests of the existing suppliers to push interoperability. So I think there's a kind of, it's in their interest to keep things within systems, right, and not introduce interoperabilities. So I think with David's point about, do we need to show what an alternative, more open, interoperable product might look like in order to develop the standards and move data around, instead of just creating data standards in the abstract and then spending years trying to get the existing suppliers to implement them. So as I say, it's this kind of multi-pronged approach, but 100% agree. The outcome is a more interoperable, standardized way of doing things and passing data around.
I'll close this off, but there is, as ever, next show and tell will be on the 17th of December. I think you should all be on the invite, but if you're not, do give us a shout. And if you're not also involved on the Slack, then do let us know and we'll get you added. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming along and your great questions. We'll share the recording and the slides afterwards. So if you did miss anything, or if you want to share with any colleagues, you can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.